welcome. It kind of takes a minute for the Substack to load as everyone's joining, and I don't want to start the important information while the computers are still catching up, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah. But I am here today with Diane Burley, and Diane writes Musings of a Storyteller, and I am Adrienne with Substack Coach. And we're going to talk mostly today. We chose a fancy title, which I love, narrative or weaving the narrative braid. Um, Stories that stick, how to tell stories that stick. But the main goal of today is to talk about something that I've had a lot of people asking me about recently, and that is how do you attract an audience, retain an audience, grow your subscriber list, use notes nicely when you talk about a wide variety of topics and you don't have a specific niche that you fit into. So, Diane, maybe you can share a little bit about your story and who you are on Substack and how you use your Substack. I know you have several different topics. We've been working together off and on for a couple of years now.
I
So
know.
time flies, hey? So, yeah, why don't you introduce yourself, your Substack, and we can jump into our topic today.
All right. Sounds awesome. Thank you so much for including me. I'm so excited. Yeah, I was a reporter. So I was a reporter for years and then turned into a corporate storyteller for companies, typically that were focused on high tech. Um, and one of the things as a writer is that you have to figure out who you're talking to and how you want to talk to them. And you're a reporter. When you're a reporter, you're talking to people to give them the facts, but you always have in your mind what is the perceived level of knowledge that they have. Right? Basically, what that means is, if you've got a beat, and I know that one of your uh, writers has a writes about health, or you write about herbs and Substack coach and so on, is that you assume that people will have some level of knowledge around it. Maybe not all the details that you do because you are the expert, but they have a modicum of information. They're certainly interested in it. And so you have to decide: am I always going to be speaking like I'm giving a scholarly journal, and you're using all the Latin words, or are you going to bring it down to a different level? So that's one of the things that you do off the top of your head as a writer. Um, as a reporter, you're coming in sharing your expertise as a uh, um, Substack coach. You're coming in as the authority. You are the authority. I don't have the authority. So when you speak to me, you're going to speak in an authoritative way to help me get to a goal, which is to better understand how to use all these machinations around Substack. When I was developing my Substack column, I didn't want to be a reporter anymore. I wanted to you know have a relationship with my audience that was more as a friend, and to talk about things not as the expert, but gee, what do you think? Come on this journey with me and explore with me. And that's what I do. So I'm not telling you you have to do that. You have to sort of figure out what is it, how does it work best for you? So that's sort of the tone in which you are going to tackle your writing. And I'm going to loop around in a second and show you how when I started out, I wasn't doing that.
That's
So
was
it
my a follow-up question I had was like, was that something that developed for you? Or
absolutely, absolutely. And then the next thing I had to do was figure out, how did I want people to feel when they finished reading what I was saying? Did I want them to take action? Like, when you're showing me how to do something on Substack, you want me to be able to be self sufficient and follow your lead. What was I doing? And, we're in an era of doom scrolling, and I wanted everybody, I wanted to be the light. I wanted to
Mhm.
be like, yeah, let's take some current events and then give us hope at the end of it. So that's my goal. Um, all the different topics I cover are then easy because I know where my destination is. I want you to feel good about what it is that I'm writing about. Um, And then I'm gonna talk about the braid and some of the different techniques it did. But the question you asked was, did I know what I was gonna do when I first started out? And the answer is absolutely not. Um, I didn't wanna have a Substack that had nothing in I didn't wanna have a store with no items in the store. So I filled it with articles that where I was authoritative. This is how you write. That's what I could do really, really well. Now I was starting to explore some different topics. I had found an ancestral relative and was digging into her a little bit more. I was taking dance. I'm writing about dance. And when I'm writing about dance, I'm not an expert in dance. I'm I just enjoy it. And so I'm talking about how I enjoy dance. I'm talking about with Leonora, I'm taking some of the lessons learned about what she had learned, and I'm relaying them to people. And I didn't want to lecture about history, but I sort of wanted to tie it into some of the things that I might have found when I was working full time in a corporate environment. Were things always inherently fair or not fair and what like that? So as I was writing these different articles, I started to see a pattern emerge and started to realize when I felt most comfortable, the types of topics I enjoyed talking about. And then so my approach emerged in that way. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does, and it seems like kind of almost what you're saying is like the thread that binds all the different topics that you write together is more your approach, your tone, and, like, how you're trying to convey the message or the information, how you're trying to convey the information to the audience rather than specifically, "This is the topic," and specifically, "This is the information."
Right. A- and those are my goals, and that is my and the tone that I'm going to use to get you there. But the structure of how I do it, and I think this is what people are probably most interested in, although I'm going to make them go through this exercise of telling me, how do you want to be perceived, as a friend, as a reporter, as the expert? What is the role that you want to play in this person's life? Remember, this is a Substack, this is a newsletter that's going out. So you're creating a relationship. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind.
Mhm.
Notes is a different animal. Notes, it can be to try and pull more people into that relationship, but it's sort of like going to a cocktail party and you're having conversations with people, and not everybody's going to want to get your phone number afterwards and say, you know, hey, let's get together for lunch. These people that sign up for your Substack are probably people that you wouldn't mind having lunch with at some point, or alive. So, I think that's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And by the way, we should invite people to send their
Yeah.
questions
I was
over.
just gonna say that too. If you have now that we have a fair bit of people joining in, but if you have any questions about, like, how do you weave together different topics? How do you present yourself on notes? What kind of structure or what kind of ideas are you looking for to kind of, like, share your different topics with your readers? Diane is talking a lot about, how you're perceived on your Substack to your readers, and also we wanna talk a bit about how you use notes to kind of draw in those readers as and even maybe a little bit about filtering, like, you want to draw in the readers and you also want to be like, the people who would not like what you write, you don't want them to come and leave a bunch of negative comments. You want them to just kind of ignore you, right?
Right.
And not sign up. So anyway, any questions that anyone who's watching has, feel free to put them in the comments there for comments, questions. So go ahead. Doesn't have to just be us talking. But Diane, why don't you talk a little bit about the maybe the filtering aspect, or like how would you use notes to kind of bring people to your Substack? Because that's kind of like maybe in traditional marketing terms, top of funnel, you could say.
So one of the ways that I use notes is well, there's a couple different things that you need to do. Sometimes you're informative, sometimes you're just engaging.
Mhm.
Engagement might be, oh, it's really dripping wet on a June 1st or it's 40 degrees below normal on June 1st in the East Coast. You're just throwing something out there. Again, you're going to a cocktail party or something. You're not going to get into a dissertation or tell the people that you just, had to have um, surgery or had a biopsy. I mean, you're not going to do that. It's just something light. Might be a photograph. It might be a photograph that you put up there. Uh, y you know, a cow coming down the road when you're traveling in Ireland, which is gonna attract people attention, right? Or, I like to do things that are ironic. Um, I'm also horrible about doing it on a regular basis because I get caught up in writing and I stop posting on notes, and then when I get into doing notes, I tend to do a lot and then I disappear. So, sort of do as I say and not as I do. Uh, but I find that when I engage with people and I like engaging with others. So Adrienne writes something that makes it easy for me. I don't have to put something up there. She's done all the heavy lifting, so I engage with her and say this is really wonderful. And then I repost it, telling people that hey, you might want to hear what Adrienne's doing. That positions you, by the way, as a thought leader. When you are reposting someone else, you are saying this is important. And so people start to look for your words as to what I apologize. Um,
Mhm.
Everybody is texting me today. So uh
That's because it's your birthday. Happy birthday.
that was my niece. Before that was my nephew. I'm going, "Oh."
Yeah.
So yeah, I won't be posting much on notes today. But
Yeah.
that is a cheat, right? Is being able to repost what others are doing. Another way of reposting, and maybe you've shown this, is when you're reading somebody's work, pull out something and repost what
Yeah.
really impacts you. They are usually very thankful that you did that, and so that's good.
Yeah.
And two, you're telling this is what's really important to me. So you're starting to see like versus like. People you're finding ways to draw people to you because you're engaging in this way.
And we have a couple comments in the chat. So Jill is asking, do you write with a specific audience in mind or write without trying to target specific kinds of audience or
And
specific
I
kinds of
know
audience?
Jill, and I'm going,
I know you
Jill,
do.
I write with you in mind. She's an editor. She is amazing, and she I'm always when I write and I'm editing my work, I'm going, is this moving the story forward? Because her words are in my head. Do I really need this information? And that's one of the things that, as a writer, we have to be really, really careful about. You can have a lot of topics. You can talk about a lot of different things in a piece. You can't be answering a whole bunch of questions. And there's a distinction in that.
Mm,
Um, so, for example, I write about history, I write about politics, I write about motherhood, I write about entrepreneurship, I write about travel. I weave a couple of these in the same story. what is the question I'm obsessed with? Am I trying to find a way that what history can teach us about what we're doing? And if I'm doing that, I'm typically, and this is my style of writing, I do write with a person in mind. And it might be Jill, it might be Adrienne, but it's somebody I'm comfortable with. It's somebody who I want them to respect me. So I'm going to respect them by
Mhm.
not putting information out there that's wrong. I spend the time to research to make sure that it's accurate. And if I don't know the answer or I'm unsure about something, I state that because being authentic is really important to that relationship that I have with my reader. So, whether I'm speaking to Jill or Adrienne or other people, I do voiceovers too. I voice read my Adrienne got me into doing that, and I really, really enjoy that. And I had somebody let me know, I really like the sound of your voice. I like how you tell the story. And I think of her when I am recording it. So yeah, I think it helps keep it personal and also it's that little, you know how there's certain things you say around adults or authority or your parents, but you wouldn't say it, you may speak one way to your friends, but you wouldn't say that to, um, an adult that's somebody older than you. It's
Yeah,
sort of like that. It keeps you in sort of a framework. So I think it's a great question, and that was a very long answer. Sorry about that.
that's okay. No, I think that's good. I'm actually right now I struggle with that on my herbalist site because I'm trying to figure out who am I actually trying to reach because women's health and things is such a broad can be such a broad audience. Who am I actually talking to? So it's something that I'm working through as well is like who's the person that I'm writing this for so that it
Right.
doesn't come across as I'm just a teacher on a podium writing this or reading or saying this information and just doing an information dump. So it's definitely something worth thinking through, I think, because I think it keeps the personality and the relationship and the authenticity in the words that you're writing if you can write to someone.
I absolutely agree. And when I was teaching writing to typically engineers, which that probably sounds funny, but engineers knew the information inside and out. Marketers didn't. They couldn't bring it to that next level. It was just general. It wasn't specific enough. And I used to say to the engineer, go back in time to when you were first learning this product. Were you nervous? Were you scared? Were you curious? Were you excited? That is the level of that's the emotional connection you want to make with somebody when you're writing about a topic. Um, I think to be consistent, if you decide that you always want to write horror, for example, it should always be horror. And if you're not going to, then you just say, I wasn't in the mood for horror today. So people do that with their Substacks, right? They just say, look, I'm not in the mood to do what I normally do. So here's a picture of a sunset and just enjoy it. That's perfectly okay too, because we're all human beings. And again, that little bit of a surprise is what happens in relationships. And I think that's okay. But overwhelmingly, you develop a consistency.
Yeah.
Um, and I decided that I want to end my pieces with hope. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
can take
noticed that.
really hard subjects
Mhm.
and have really, like I've talked about the death of my best friend. Um, but at the very end of it, I was talking about how her kids were going to be coming to my house for Thanksgiving. So I brought it back up at the very end, and that's how I tackled that. Um, because that's what we deal with in life, right? We're all dealing with a lot of different emotions. What is the end goal? And how do you bring it back to that point and weave it together?
Yeah. we have a couple other comments about notes. So one person says that Mika says, I only have notes currently, not sure how to transition into a longer post. I have memoir in progress covering adoption, cults, abuse, and loss, told with dark humor, of course. And then Susan says, I'm writing about the reflections of people I interviewed on my podcast. My stories are all made via the interviewee's story, so it is all niche, but I'm not getting comments or likes or traction on notes. I'm getting opens and reads, but no one engages. How do I get the reader's attention to act? So I'll talk first to Mika and then I will let you discuss about how to get your readers' attention. Mika, getting into longer posts, that's kind of, I'm not sure if you're talking like technically on Substack, how do I create a longer post? In which case, that's an article instead of a note. Or if you're talking more like conceptually, how can I move from notes to posts and kind of like get into that kind of a groove instead of just the notes? And one thing that I've noticed that I wanted to just drop in here because it kind of goes with this is I actually took a break from my herbalist site, which is my one that I started with 4 years ago on Substack. As I was completing my training, I took pretty much 6 months off of writing and I just used that time where I would use my phone, go on the app, and engage with other people. And during those 6 months, I still grew my subscriber list because I was interacting with other people on notes. So there's nothing wrong with just using notes for a while. But part of the importance is to also interact with other people on notes and not just have outgoing content always. And Diane, do you have any thoughts on notes versus long form posts and attracting engagement instead of just you roll your eyes?
Well, they're two it's two different things, right?
Yeah.
Mm, your Substack posts are sort of like your your storefront, your store. This is what you're selling to people. You want them to consume, whether you charge or not. I don't charge for mine. And that, by the way, was a decision. I that was part of my goal is to, hey, there's enough doom scrolling out there. You got to pay for all this stuff to people, and I want to provide a service. There's a meaningful way to think about a lot of things that are going on, but I don't want you to have to slit your wrists at the end of the day. So, come along with me and we'll find a way to smile together in the face of, um that's me. But that's what you're selling. Whether you're selling, I want a subscription or, I want somebody to like it or whatever. That you need to have the long form posts there. Substack is more of your, I'm trying to get you to follow me. Following is a good thing to do too. Start following people. And again, follow people that sort of are in the same genre of what it is. Like, I would assume, Adrienne, you follow other herbalists, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I follow all sorts of writers. I follow, writers. I follow, I ended up in this whole genealogy universe, writing about my Aunt Molly, who's 103. I mean, she's just an interesting character, and I throw her in periodically. She gives me that perspective, that older person perspective. Um, Somebody who wasn't, when she grew up, they went by horse and carriage to Christmas at grandpa's house. I mean, where do you get that type of information, right? Um, I'm writing about an ancestral relative who was a labor organizer, and that's part of a long form idea for a book. So I go back there and I sort of look at what she fought for in the 1880s and how things today really haven't changed too much. But then again, I find something to go up about at the very end, right? Um, but because these are ancestors, genealogy and family historians are saying, "Oh, this is really cool. Let me follow you." And then I realized I better have a section on my site called Voices of the Past, which is which answers this question about, it addresses um, people in my family, ancestors, and going back generations. I'm still giving you the purpose of weaving in history and some sort of common current day situation, my own perspective, but that's under Voices of the Past. Life Deconstructed is my other piece, is my other section, and that's any crazy thing that comes to mind. So it might be like why I love, hip hop dance, even though I was a figure skater once in my life, just silly stuff. Um, my boys and I cooking together, it's, but, and then I might bring in historical references to those things. So when I was writing about dance and hip hop, I talk about how this evolved from oppression, and we've got Orthodox women in my class, which is really interesting too. It's just really fun, and it's totally different from Voices of the Past because it's life deconstructed. It's just any crazy thing that goes through my mind. The third area is giving tips to family writers
Mm.
and folks like yourself. You'd all gain something. It's that different. I speak as an authority, less as, a friend on a journey. Um, and I just do it. I had this, and I just started recouching them, recasting them for that audience. But I have 3 different segments on my site. I don't really promote that last one. Um, I probably don't promote any of them the way I should.
So
So
um if these are kind of like the bigger pieces, and then your posts nest into one of those, and that's like your long form content that's on your Substack site. And so then how do you contrast your notes to that? You mentioned notes maybe being a little more like your personality or people meeting you versus people engaging with your content.
right. So when I finish a post, I send it out to uh, m- my subscribers, but I also send it to notes. And the notes piece tends to be, it's more fun. It's more direct. It's more marketing copy, right? It's teasy. It's clickbaity. Um,
Mhm.
one of here's a viral one that happened. I was sort of stuck for a topic, and I found a bag of teacups that I had taken when my dad died, and they were my grandmother's. And I forgot I even had them. I just, stuck them in a bag and stuck them in the closet. And I'm like, what's in this bag? And I pulled them out, and it was, I don't know, a dozen or so mismatched teacups and saucers. And I'm looking at the back of them, and I'm Googling to see who it's, and it turns out it's like some really cool china bone china out of, uh, England, it's set in France and so on. Anyway, I started envisioning her having women over to her house, and I'd found some quotes um, about my grandmother in the newspaper. The newspaper, the ladies section of the newspaper of like the 1940s was like today's version of, I don't know, Facebook. People was like, oh, well, they went to the party together and she wore sequins. So I'm finding this stuff, and I'm envisioning this narrative between a couple of her and her ladies who lunch friends drinking out of her little teacups. And then the headline was, our kids don't want them. And it's about like, what do you do with these collectibles that have some meaning to you, but and my kids don't give a damn about these things. So what am I going to do? That that one went viral. That one, I had so many comments that it's like literally 3,000 people read that article. Now, I haven't been able to repeat that. So,
Yeah.
but I got on the radar of some folks, and I did get some subscribers out of. I tend to get subscribers from follows. I think that's I think that's where people can be a little bit more. I mean, do you want everybody to be your best friend, or do you want just the right people to So it's who you follow, they follow you, you comment on their stuff, they comment on yours, and you start seeing a relationship build over time. What do you think? Is that how you
Yeah, like I think um and I like to use my herbalist site as an example because I think my Substack coach site is biased because I'm writing on Substack about writing on Substack. So it kind of gives you a different edge, I guess. But, for example, in the herbalist site, maybe there are other herbalists or other people that talk about natural health that I would comment on their things or restack their things because it's relevant and I don't necessarily want to write on that specific item for that specific depth. And they would then comment on mine or restack mine or like it, right? So then our audiences are seeing each other's content because of that. Um, but I use notes as kind of like a way to reach people who are not already subscribed to me so that
right,
they know that I exist. And
right,
I do that in 2 ways, right? First of all, by sharing content. So I do like the clips of my long form posts that I'll share with an extra comment or something like that. And I try to make it, more personal so they're getting to know me before they maybe want to get to know my content. Like, do you want to know what I'm writing about because the information is good, or do you want to know what I'm writing about because you connect with how I present things? And there's both sides of that are good.
right,
But then I'm also using notes to post little things like my cat sleeping on my puzzle while I'm trying to
right.
build my puzzle,
And I
right?
bet and I bet you people engage with that, right?
Yeah, people like it. Sometimes
They
they get
love
some comments and yeah, because they're showing that you're a real person. This isn't just about selling you something, right? Um, and then but I also more use notes to engage with other people. So it's kind of become my app that I use to scroll and instead of Instagram or Facebook. And I'll use it to just kind of like and comment and restack other people's stuff that I find interesting. And then that broadens the people that see what I do, but it also broadens my feed so that um I'm basically telling the Substack algorithm, for lack of a better word, where I fit into this web of connections that is Substack.
I just thought of something in my in my body of work under the tips. I do have something there on social media. So one of the things you guys might consider doing is, well, a couple of things. To newsjack. Newsjack is like what's going on this in this day in history or what's going on today. So, for example, AI is all over the news, right? And I had an anecdote today. I've I use AI to analyze. I love using it for an analysis. And what some of you might consider doing if you have a large body of work. And Susan, I saw you're doing it from your podcast. Some of the folks that you're doing. If you take the transcripts, load it all into a Word doc, turn it into a PDF, whatever, and put it into something like a Chat GPT or Claude, ask it what do you see? What is the commonalities between all of these? And sometimes, that's that other eye looking at saying, "Oh, wow, you always write about this." It might surprise you. It might surprise you. Like you might go, "I didn't know I was always doing that." Um, so use AI in that way. But anyway, AI is in the news, and I know it from a writer, the good and the bad, right? What an LLM is, blah blah blah. And I had some contract work this past year, and they were using it to create code. And I noticed that every time they had an idea, it was breaking our beta. And I'm reading these stories about how companies are getting rid of their junior programmers, and they think that they're just going to use code generated from LLMs. And I'm thinking that the LLM always changes up the sentence, and you ask the same question several times, it always regurgitates it in a different way, right? Does it do that with code? I mean, like, how does anybody have a stable environment if everything's always going to change? The interface was changing. I'm like, is any human being overseeing this code? And they're looking at me. So I put that out there today and I'm like, look, I don't even know what I'm talking about, but this is what I've noticed about pros. Does it work the same thing way with code? And I'm actually getting engagement on it.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's just a weird thing, but it's in the news and people are interested. And people are saying, I don't know either, but I do think this is an interesting idea. So you never know what people are going to engage with, which
Yeah.
goes back to the teacups. Like, I think that's something I put up there is like, my kids won't want them. What do you do with all of this? And, uh, this woman, that's how I met Lori Olson. She says, my grandparents collected goblets at every place that they ever, so they had like 60 years of collecting goblets. She has over 1,000 goblets. She goes, how am I,
Wow.
who am I going to give these to? I mean,
That's a lot.
but anyway, so,
Yeah.
but newsjacking is something that you might want to look at. I, and then look at your body of work and see if it slots in on a calendar. Um, I did something on tinnitus, which is hearing, right? May is National Hearing and Speech Month. So I threw my article on tinnitus, which was from a year ago, out there. And, I got some likes on it, but it's another chance to get that post back out into the universe and start an engagement with people. So look at your body of work, see if it fits into on a calendar. Is it something you could be posting about? If it's in the news and you're interested in about it, or maybe you don't know anything about it, and ask other people, hey, weigh in. What do you think? And I think that's one of the things about engagement is that you have to ask a question. You have to make it so people want to engage.
Mhm.
Um, what's the best way to do this? What do you guys think? Or what pieces? I don't. I'm just making things off the top of my head, but
Yeah. Yeah. No, I found that as well. And the thing is, it depends too on how many people that you're connected with. So if you're not following many people and you're not really subscribed to anyone and you're brand new to the platform, if you ask a question, the possibility that enough people will see it that some of them will answer is pretty low. So you want to be subscribed to a variety of publications. You want to be following other people and you want to be engaging with other people so that there is people out there that are aware of your existence that when you ask a question or post a note or something, they can actually engage with you. The long form engagement is a whole different ballgame, I've found, because it really depends where your audience is. So if you have a large, and you can see this in your post stats, but if you have a large um, segment of your audience that's using the Substack app, you're more likely to get engagement than if you have a large segment of your audience that is just getting your emails in their inbox. So I have several clients that, they imported a list and these are all people that are used to hearing from them via a newsletter. And so they might reply to the newsletter um, email that came into their inbox, but they're not going to actually click through to Substack and comment on the post. Um, Versus people that joined your publication from the app, they may be more likely to actually comment because they're using the app. They're reading it in the inbox that's on the app instead of via email. Um, that's been my experience with the different audiences and who you're writing for. It goes back to who you're writing for again. So,
exactly. And you know, I think if you, I've I've tried putting questions out there, thinking, okay, if I get enough answers, I can use it as part of a story. I've had mixed success with that. Um, Subsect tends to be a lot of people, unless it's political. If it's political, then everybody weighs in. But and I don't know if you have any political writers on here, opinion writers that way. But I think the exploration, people just sort of silently like it. And I think, Suzanne, I think that's part of what you're struggling with is how do you get them to go beyond the heart? They're reading it, which is that's great.
Yeah.
But how do you get them to take it to the next level? And you'll unlock it. You know, you'll
Yeah.
find people that you're and engage with them, and then they'll start engaging. And that's typically who engages on my pieces. People I've engaged with on a regular basis, and they weigh in and they'll tell me. I have some really cool people too. They'll well, that's not entirely right. I go,
Yeah. It's a lot of fun though, like, I've found that as well. You end up with kind of this circle of people that are kind of your core community that engage with you predictably, and then, other people are kind of, like, beyond that, they might like kind of the outer circle, they might like maybe they'll occasionally comment if it really hits home, but you kind of end up with that inside circle that is reliably, interacting with you and you're interacting with them.
well,
So,
I have a question for you or somebody who wants to answer this question. Um, you send it out and it comes in their email box and they respond. They try and post a comment and the comment comes back to me in my inbox, but it doesn't post onto the site itself. So the email is not in any way connected to the website. And so now I have to go through my responses to see, so that I can respond to them. And I so wish that that they would not read it in the email, that they would click all the way through to the site
to the
itself, post their
well,
comments. Just
there's a bit of a mix there, and like Christy says in the comments here, I think plenty of people don't know they can engage with the newsletter because that's not what newsletters historically were, and there's a lot of truth to that because oftentimes what happens is they're not leaving a comment on the newsletter when they get it in their email inbox. They're just hitting reply. And so they're replying to you and it comes through the Substack RSS feed, but it goes to your inbox. It doesn't go as a comment. Because they have to create Braid, Christy, they have to create a Substack profile to leave comments, which is a barrier to entry. There's definitely lots of people who are like, "I don't want another app. I don't want another sign in. I don't want to do another thing." So even though they're part of your email list and your subscribers, they're not necessarily on Substack. They don't necessarily have a Substack profile that they can then leave comments from, but they can still reply to your newsletters. So um, and Steve says Diane is one of the best writers on Substack in any genre, always has been, and is even more talented now. Thanks to Adrienne for amplifying. Happy birthday, Diane. That was a nice comment. Um, yeah,
yeah, and Micah was saying I don't want to mention politics. And I'm I don't either per se, but I do say things like, um, well, this week was particularly gloomy, so I'm really amping up how to come up with something positive to say. I address it because we're all feeling it, no matter where you are. Thanks, still, um, no matter where you are in on whatever your feelings are, it's stressful. And if we all can unite and decide that, hey, we've got some commonality, and you know, I tend to write about humanity and and just how we can all move forward in a certain way. So, and like I said, I take different paths in getting there. To the piece I've got coming out today is it's another Leonore piece. Leonore was this organizer. She's like she's a distant cousin from the 1880s. She was a labor organizer, and when she left the Knights of Labor, which was one of the earliest all-inclusive labor unions, it took people from all denominations in all walks of life and in different professions, not unskilled professions, including being a domestic servant. Um, she was involved as the head of the women's department, and investigating labor practices. And she left there and she remarried and moved out to, she was widowed with small children when she had to join the textile mill. Anyway, she moves out to Missouri. And while she's there, she joins an organization, a women's organization, to help house single working women.
Mm.
And this was a time when it was really, really hard. It's the 1880s. They've got to work. I mean, everybody had to work. And yet, housing for single women was just like if you got a room above a saloon, I mean, you're putting yourself in a very dangerous spot. Um, because there are not bears in the saloon, there are men. And so that made it really, really difficult. That's my politics, Micah. And anyway, but I tend to say it with humor. Um, anyway, Pope Leo, and I don't know if anybody knows that the current Pope's name is also Leo, but Pope Leo at the time, the Pope at the time was Pope Leo the 13th. And there were so many parallels between 13 and 14 and Leonora. So that's what this piece is about, which is a really interesting weave about, it's not about Pope Leo the 14th, but it's really just talking about how do we enact change? And that's what the piece is really about.
Mhm.
So if you want to look for the politics, I suppose you could, but that's not the point of what I was writing about. And I sort of shy away from anything that's laden with politics. You're you're the type of person who's curious, you enjoy history, you're probably a humanitarian. Those are the types of people that will glom toward this piece more so than another one when I talk about my husband and his pterodactyl arms in my kitchen. Uh, you know,
Yeah. So getting to that, because that was a really great bridge to this, but how do you, one thing we want to talk about is more the structure of weaving together different storylines and like making your Substack kind of a um, cohesive publication, so to speak. So, can you talk a little bit more about that before we have to close for the day?
yeah, I think yes, Lisa, that is correct. Lisa's comment is terrific. I love people read it. Um, yeah, I want to offer hope. That's number one. So that's my destination, right? It's gonna end up. I want you to feel like you are empowered to i- have positive feelings. You can have this idea of hope. And what I'm braiding together are a number of different topics that take you on a path of curiosity. Think of it like a river. The river's going past the tree and past the cow and you can mention this, right? But where does it take you? It takes you, I want to go whitewater rafting, and now I'm into, level 3 waves out here. So that's cool. Um I'm weaving together curiosity, hope, heart. There's tends to be family mentioned in every piece that I write. Um, and I've read through some of your different readers or your clients' work. Some people are looking at how to improve their lives from a health standpoint. Other people are doing so from more physical or financial. Again, you probably got curiosity, but you're going to have your own destination. So it really doesn't matter what I do. You can take all these different topics and then I pull them together with a question. And my questions tend to be, um, like this one that I did today was really like, why did the Pope care? And how does Leonora, how are we walking away with this idea that we can enact some change? And that was my destination, if any of that makes some sense. I'm better at writing than I am at speaking.
That's okay. It's great. Yeah. So, yeah, was is there anything else before we close off that you would like to share? today for new people on Substack that are like, I have all these ideas that I want to share. How do I get this out there?
Do I have
Do you
well
have any thoughts?
well, one of the things that I was gonna suggest that people do is if you're really, like, trying to grapple with this yourself, write this down. No matter what I write about, I'm really writing about and that's a really important exercise to do, and do it again, and then again. So no matter what you write about, I'm really writing about human resistance, resilience, human curiosity, um, maternal health, whatever it is. I mean, I can't put words in your mouth. You need to figure this out. And then do the exercise again tomorrow after you forget about what you said today. Do it. And when you start to see a pattern, you're going to go, okay, that's what I'm writing about. And then the other thing that you want to do is say, "H- how do you want to be perceived? Are you the expert friend? Are you an authority? Are you exploring? Is this somebody I'm going on a walk with? Um, is this a reporter who's just giving me the facts and not divulging anything about their personal life? Because people write like that too, right?
Mhm.
Um, that's not how I do it. With me, I'm in it.
Yeah.
You know a lot about me by the time you finish reading.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. So, okay. Well, this has been really great, Diane, and thank you for joining me today. And everyone that just joined recently, the replay will be up soon. So you'll be able to rewatch the whole episode together. Um, yeah, and I think that this has been a great time, and we'll have to do this again sometime. I know we both we mentioned AI briefly, and that's something that you have more experience with, perhaps with your background writing for tech and stuff, and that might be a cool topic to do at some point. Again, we did a talk or some posts or something about this, like, back when it first came out, like, in 2024, beginning of 2025, and it would be interesting to revisit. Um, but
I'm just gonna put in the, notes if I can get
yeah,
things
it
are
looked like you were busy doing something, so
yeah, it's a social media strategy simplified. So notes really is I don't think notes is mentioned per se, but this was a chapter in a book that I contributed to. So, uh, y'all might find this, uh, interesting. It talks about newsjacking and finding the calendar and things like that. So, but it's
yeah.
fairly simplified.
Yeah, and check out Diane's Substack Musings of the Storyteller because it's a lot of fun. I love getting I don't have a lot of time to read full-length posts, but I do read yours because they're just such a fun romp at the end of the week to read through and,
See,
continue
you've
with
made
my
my day.
weekend. So, alright, thanks everyone for joining us, and, we will see
Thanks so
you all
much.
again. Bye for now.